He didn't ask me until yesterday.
We're fine, Terry.
Everybody's okay. All right, everyone. We obviously have a very tight schedule, so we would like to get started. Everyone could please sit down. Thank you very much. I want to welcome everyone to our panel and say thanks for having me here as the moderator. And now they're going to be glad they have the fastest talker in this entire building to moderate this panel, because we have had to pare back the schedule and we have only 20 minutes. But I will say that already all of my lovely panelists have welcomed questions in the coffee break. Everyone says they're absolutely willing and delighted to continue our conversation after we have to wrap up here, just to stay on schedule. So I'm Terry Schultz. I'm a journalist covering NATO, for those of you who haven't had to run into me before. Happy to be here. I'm joined here for this panel on harnessing emerging technologies for a strategic advantage by Rika Frank, Dr. Ulrika Frank, with the European Council on Foreign Relations, Barbara McQuiston, who is the chair of the board of Diana, someone we all refer to by first name, as if we know her well, and we actually don't, and Barbara's going to help us understand more about Diana. And Andrea Traversone, he is the managing partner for the NATO, now I got to get it, Defense Innovation Accelerator. It's quite new, which is why it's not on the tip of my tongue yet. And Andrea is also going to explain to us about these new mechanisms that NATO has. But we're going to start with Ulrika. And everyone here knows that Ulrika is the drone expert. the drone expert in our environment, and one of the things that we have definitely learned with Ukraine is just how technology has changed warfare, and not just fighting, but also trying to make peace. And one of the stories that we have shared that we both treasure a lot, and many of you will have seen this, is when a drone led a Russian soldier who was trying to defect on the battlefield to safety as he was under fire from his own forces, trying to get off the battlefield in Ukraine. And he was led by a drone in the sky by Ukrainian armed forces, telling him how to get out of being under fire and to save his own life. So these are some of the stories that Rika covers well, and she is going to talk more about just how we can see what we are going to see in terms of technology dominating the space in new ways to wage war and peace. And then we will move on to the people who are going to tell us how to make that happen. Thank you very much, Rika.
Well, thanks so much, Terry, for this great introduction. Yeah, I'll try to be brief, but give you a sense of what's happening in Ukraine with regard to emerging technologies. So I think the most important thing to note really is that we are seeing a lot of new emerging disruptive technologies being used in Ukraine by the Ukrainian armed forces and by the Russian armed forces as well. But at the same time, we also still have the old. So I keep referring to this war as World War I with 21st century technology, because we have this parallel of trenches and dragon teeth, but at the same time, we do see a lot of drones in the sky. And really, when I say a lot of drones, I mean a lot of drones. I'm sure you've all seen the RUSI estimate that the Ukrainian armed forces are losing 10,000 drones a month. So that is losing 10,000 drones a month, which gives you an idea of how many drones are in the sky. And this is really the first thing I think to note with regard to this war, is that drones are ubiquitous. They're everywhere, and we haven't seen drones used in this scale yet. And also importantly, we've never seen that many civilian systems being used, and I'll get to this in a second. Another really important technology is kind of software-based AI-enabled technologies and apps. We have apps that track missiles, where individual people can send in information about missiles they see, and that track how the missiles are flying. We have the role of space. All of this is incredibly important. I'm going to give you a few more examples, and the two main points I want to make over the next 2 minutes. I'll try to be short, but. So the first thing I really want to note about technology in this Russian aggression of Ukraine is the enormously important role that private companies and private civilian companies are playing here. So a few examples. We have Google that has put a lot of Ukrainian websites under basically a technical, a digital umbrella, which meant that they couldn't be hurt by DDoS attacks anymore. We have Amazon that has allowed Ukraine to put a lot of their state functions into the cloud and then therefore save their data and continue the functioning of their states. We have Starlink and SpaceX with their satellites that ensure internet connectivity in Ukraine. We have the Chinese firm DJI that is providing a lot of drones, or rather not really providing, but drones are being used in Ukraine by this firm. So the three observations I have here is that we have a lot of private civilian companies that are playing an important role. These companies are primarily American. That's something for the Europeans to note. And on the civilian drone side, we have a massive number of Chinese drones. What are the lessons that NATO partners should be taking from this fact? First of all, I think we need close and closer links between private companies and the state in peacetime, so that if something happens, you can hit the ground running, so to speak, with regard to these relationships. And this is something where we can definitely learn from Ukraine, because the Ukrainian state has been incredibly good at communicating and working with private companies. The second lesson Europeans and NATO should be taking from this is that we need to rethink our vulnerabilities and dependencies and really think about whether there are areas where the state needs to come back and whether we really want to rely on private companies here, or whether we want to build up our capabilities ourselves. And space is one example I would note. And then also companies need to take note. Companies need to prepare for a future where military confrontations are happening and their technologies are being used, and they need procedures in place as to how to decide who to side with, because not every future war will be as black and white as the Russia's aggression of Ukraine has been, where it hasn't been difficult for Western companies to side. And they will need to think how to control the use of their products in future military confrontations. There was point one on civilian companies and point two, even in 1 minute, on private individuals. Because this is something I find extremely important and I feel we haven't really picked up on enough. And that is the fact that technology has enabled and motivated the involvement of individual people from all over the world in this war. What I mean by this, we have private individuals using the internet, using AI-enabled facial recognition, using all kinds of technology to analyze images shared over social media and identify, for example, war criminals. You have amateur hackers that are supporting Ukraine. You have crowdfunding efforts where private individuals are giving money through PayPal, with Bitcoin, all of these things, and collect money with which drones are being bought in Ukraine. And we're talking thousands of drones that have been bought through this private funding. So I'll close with the lessons on this for NATO allies. I really feel that as NATO countries, we need to take note of this increasing involvement of individuals in warfare. This isn't the same as kind of, war bonds where in the past. We have individuals much more involved in warfare. And I think we need to look to Ukraine and learn from Ukraine on how to harness this involvement, because Ukraine has been incredibly good at kind of getting this public support, playing with the meme culture, working with NAFO, these kind of things. I'm not sure NATO or the EU or states are able to do this to the same extent. So looking at how Ukraine has been doing that would be useful. And I'll end here.
Thank you, Rika. And I think for Barbara and Andrea, you're going to want to bring Rika as your opening act every single place you speak, right? Because she makes all your cases, and then you say, yes, we have thought about these things, and this is what we're doing to address them.
And we have thought about dual-use technology and how it's being used. I think Ukraine is an example of it. I also think that there are a lot of other challenges, security challenges that we have in energy, in food security, and we have capital, human capital in our countries that want to stand up with solutions to a lot of these challenges. So NATO, by standing up Diana, the defense innovative accelerator for the North Atlantic, I joke because we all call it Diana so much. I almost feel like my first name's Diana. But we launched these challenges in an unclassified side where we're looking for the solution space to come from what I would look at non-traditional technologists, ideas, universities, startup companies, entrepreneurs that want to engage not only in the technology side, but in the mission for their country and for the alliance. This is incredibly important because, to me, national and economic security go hand in hand, and being able to work with these entrepreneurs to help them accelerate their business in the dual use side, as well as looking at how these technologies and solutions would work in the field for a lot of the things that we do across NATO, which includes not only military use, but also looking at humanitarian aid and disaster migrants and other sort of challenges that the equipment and what we need to have in the field meets both a dual use technology market. This is going to be important to develop that pipeline. Diana just started. We have just opened the offices in the Imperial College at London. Professor Deep Chana is the managing director. And we've just, as of June 19th, launched the first 3 challenge problems. And we want to be able to have people across the alliance put their solutions forward. We want to put them in an accelerator so we can help accelerate the business idea, and then also go to another phase of test, experimentation, and evaluation, and then rapid adoption so that one or all of the alliance can look at how this technology can make a difference for them in their mission. That's going to be very critical, and it's going to be important for us to be able to work with these startup companies and fund them and be able to help them accelerate the time at which they can get to market. So we're lucky to have Diana to start that pipeline and the ecosystem so that entrepreneur can right away start thinking about the business, start thinking about how to do business with the government, across the alliance, and also accelerate that innovation demand signal within NATO to be able to work at a more rapid pace, to be able to pull in the human capital from our alliance and strengthen our industrial base. It's really what we're looking at doing. So that's NATO, but complementary to that is also the NATO Investment Fund.
Because this is all very expensive, isn't it, Rike? If you talk about that many drones and how many thousands and thousands and tens of thousands per item. NATO, of course, I mean, I don't want to give too much credit here for being innovative, but I mean, they're also thinking about how to fund this.
Indeed,
Indeed,
this initiative, the Nation Innovation Fund, is a very innovative and courageous activity that was set up by NATO and the allies. The NATO Innovation Fund is a one of a kind. It is the first fund that has been stood up to secure the future of the 1 billion citizens of the allies and to enhance NATO technological edge. This is a fund that is coming to fill a gap that I witnessed over 25 years of investing in deep tech in Europe, which is the innovation gap, which has not been funded properly neither by the public or the private market. And NATO stepped in to fill that gap, to invest in those deep technologies and enhance disruptive technologies that Ulrika was talking about. And so far, these markets have been underdeveloped, and the development of this technology has been uneven across the allies. And we also face a threat of competitive investment from adversaries and potential acquisition of these deep technologies by adversaries. And it is because of that that NATO and its allies have set up this multi-sovereign €1 billion fund to invest in this innovation to secure the safety of the allies' citizens and to foster the innovation and the adoption of these technologies by the allies.
This is really a public-private operation in many ways. In looking at what the alliance has stood up for Diana between the accelerators and test centers, having over 100 of them available to be able to support and work with the entrepreneurs that want to get in the field, that want to make a difference and grow their company, but then also give them the opportunity to have that financed all the way, in looking at how we can progress the technology, the company, and being able to address the security problems that we have now and well into the future. And And I would also say to be able to expand what we have as the definition of security technology, because NATO has dealt a lot with armaments, but what we're talking about is technology that has a broad base. It has a broad base in energy and climate. We had the climate people here earlier talking about the challenges that are here. There's a number of solutions that are out there. How do we tap into that, and how do we inspire our citizens so that they realize they have a path forward in working with these challenge areas?
Rika, what's the biggest gap that you see, since you're looking at the development side and you're looking at the provision side of these kinds of not just weapons but technologies? What is your biggest question for them on how they're going to deal with it, how they're going to match the speed of the private sector in developing these without necessarily institutional support?
I find it really difficult to identify the one gap because especially when it comes to artificial intelligence, we're not talking about kind of one technology or one capability, but rather development throughout all military and indeed civilian capabilities. So it's a bit hard for me to point out the one thing that we need. But what I would very much emphasize is really there has been a big change over the last few decades where I'd say ever since the Sputnik shock of the 1950s, we had the situation that new technology was being primarily developed and funded in state-backed and often military-backed laboratories and development agencies. And over the last decade or so, this really has changed. Now a lot of the cutting-edge stuff comes out of the private civilian sector. But this has direct military implications. And I was mentioning there are so many really, private companies working in Ukraine that have nothing to do with the military, really, but their services are helping Ukraine keep alive, help Ukraine defend themselves and all of that. And so I think the most important thing really for NATO and for our states is to kind of get away from this distinction between, this is the military, these are weapons, these are kind of armament, this is the armament industry that are building the things we fight with, and this is all the civilian rest, because that doesn't work anymore. And so I think what Barbara just said is exactly what needs to be done.
The market has considerably changed. It used to be government would fund research and development 70%, 30% was commercial. That has flipped. It is closer to 30%, which is government funded, and 70%, which is commercial funded. But when we're talking about the future of warfare, we're talking about all the things that we can do prior to getting to a weapon. And the type of technology, we're seeing what's happening with software. We're looking at how the data can combat disinformation with space systems. Well, that's working with commercial systems to give you capabilities right away so that you have that information, that knowledge, and you can do things with it. But it's going to be critical that we have a pace and an ability to work with the startup companies, to work with innovation, and to work at a commercial pace and finance in a commercial framework so that we can keep these companies engaged and working on the security issues that NATO sees across the alliance.
Can I just, go ahead, Andrea.
I think that the NATO Innovation Fund and the sister activity in Diana are sending a strong signal to the innovators that this market opportunity is available to them. What we are providing as a fund to entrepreneurs is basically a threefold threat, which is basically access to a new market, a very significant market, patient capital, a technology due diligence and certification and validation that they find hard to find in the market from traditional financial investors. And so we think that this is a very strong call to action by the entrepreneurs, that there's a great opportunity here, those that have commercial product, to adapt them and target them to defense and security.
I mean, one thing that we're hearing is there's not really any option for either side, right? I mean, this is the obvious way forward. Why did it not happen sooner? Of course, I have to find a problem with it. Why didn't you do it before?
Well, it's one of those things where I think that NATO is really realizing that it needs innovation and innovation across the enterprise. So one of the good things between these two agencies organizations starting within NATO is that we're creating that demand signal within NATO to address the processes that they have so that they can really leverage and take advantage of the market.
What I've witnessed, because I've been in this market for 25 years, it has been very hard for individual governments or the private market to step into this opportunity. So I think NATO was was really brave and courageous as a supranational organization to realize this and step into the gap and leading with this fund and with the Diana activity. I think very few other organizations could have done this.
But it also needs the money. This is not like, it's not, completely beneficial, only beneficial to those companies. NATO needs it as well. The sad thing is we are out of time. And this is my fault because I have to go be on the air. But as I said, my panelists have agreed to continue the conversation. I wish I was here to continue the conversation in person right now, but always leave them wanting more, right? That's what we say. And thank you. This is so interesting. This really brings us to a new level of what can be done, and brings in also the young people that we're always looking for to become interested and educated about NATO. I think this is also a really important channel for them, for you to get the best and brightest minds, and for them to understand what this is about. So thank you very much, and I apologize to everyone that we had to cut this short, but Jake Sullivan was kind of worth it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Many thanks to our distinguished panelists, and now 15-minute coffee break.
Hello and welcome to the NATO Public Forum YouTube studio. I'm Jack Kelly from TLDR News, and I'm very happy to be joined by Italy's Deputy Prime Minister. Very nice to meet you.
Thank you for asking me today.
Firstly, let's start with the big issue. Do you think that NATO is doing enough to help Ukraine at the moment? And what do you think is going to come from the conference in that regard?
It's important for us to protect Ukraine, because it's important to respect the international law. I think we need to work step by step. The first important step is to have Ukraine with us in NATO-Ukraine Council.
Yes.
It's a first step paving the way for a full membership in the future after the end of the war. This council is an engagement, an important engagement for Ukraine, because Ukraine will be part also on the political debate, not only talking on situation in Ukraine. But this, I think, is a good message to Ukraine, a positive message to Ukraine, paving the way for the future.
Absolutely. We've heard a lot about NATO's new 360 approach to security and the global nature of threats around the world. With that in mind, how much attention do you think NATO should be paying in the Asia-Pacific?
I think security is a package. It's important now to protect the West and Europe through a strong engagement in Ukraine. But at the same time, we need to look at the South, Mediterranean Sea, the Indo-Pacific region. But NATO is not only a defense organization, it's also a political community, a political organization. For this, we need to work hard for peace, for a stronger engagement in other regions. My idea is to work more with India. India is a democracy. It's a big democracy. For this, it's important in the Indo-Pacific region to work with India, of course. We are in favor of the status quo. Also on Taiwan, one China policy is our strategy. China is an interlocutor, but it's also a competitor. For us, we need to strengthen the cooperation with our friends Japan, New Zealand, Australia. But in the same time, it's important to work hard in Africa. Look at the sub-Saharan region. The terrorism and Wagner are working hard against our security. Africa is very important for everybody. For this, we need to invest and to have a good policy in favor of growth of this continent.
Absolutely. Hopefully we'll be able to have good conversations with other people at the summit about all of those kind of issues when it comes to global politics and your place in them. Thank you so much for your time, Deputy Prime Minister.
Thank you for asking me today.
Thank you.